Well, tensions are rising in northern Ethiopia as the Afar regional government accuses TPLF fighters of crossing into its territory and seizing 6 villages. Officials say the attacks targeted pastoralist communities in Megale district, describing it as the most serious flare-up since the end of the northern conflict. Afar authorities vow to defend the region if such assaults continue, warning of renewed instability. Now, the TPLF has not responded to the allegations, but the incident highlights lingering mistrust between the two regions despite the 2022 Pretoria peace deal. And now, joining us on the conversation is Dr. Senait Senay, Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia Director and Amhara Guard Strategic Studies Group member. Dr. Senay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so are we ever going to see a true lasting end to the clashes between the TPLF and neighboring regions like Afar and Amhara?
That's a very good question. During the Northern War, the war that was ongoing between 2020 and 2022, there is an implicit bias there. The international media reported it as a Tigray war, but what actually happened was the war raged the first 7 months in Tigray, then in Afar and in Amhara. A lot of activists, human rights advocates, and in general the Ethiopian regime oppositions were time and again advocating for a solution that addresses the root cause of this conflict. So ever since the so-called reform came in 2018, since the TPLF-led ruling party is replaced by the OPP-led ruling party, which Dr. Abiy Ahmed presides on, a number of conflicts that have been ongoing for the past 35 years, but have surfaced. And one of it was, of course, TPLF not being satisfied with the newest reform. And ever since, all the efforts that have been undertaken to quell that conflict in 2022 culminated in a kind of a band-aid solution. So what happened was the Pretoria Agreement supposedly ended the conflict. But in reality, back then, a lot of us were actually urging the international community and other external mediators that having a full-on conversation with all stakeholders involved is necessary to actually stop this conflict. So 3 years forward, what happened was TPLF, the actual one of the stakeholders that was actually included in the negotiation itself, is embroiled back in the conflict again, because they are claiming that the agreements that they entered with the government back then is not fully followed through. But in reality, we do know TPLF has now dissociated into many factions, some working with the government and some opposing the government. Now, for your question regarding whether we will see any peace in the future, I think again it all comes back with addressing all the root causes. Again, at the end of the day, when we just put a band-aid on such a huge, complex, a problem, and try to close it off and move over, it's people that pay the price. For example, now 3 years on, the Afar people are still going to, carry the brunt of war once again. 6 villages have already been invaded, and there's heavy clashes, and again, it's civilians that are paying. To add on this, after the Pretoria Agreement, that is 2 years where Afar, Tigray, and Amhara region, there was a war, like a very heavy life cost and very bloody war that was ongoing. Just 4 months after the peace negotiation, the war on Amhara continued in Amhara region. So the war didn't stop in Amhara region for the entire 5 years. And now Tigray and Afar is embroiled back in again. So this actually shows that all stakeholders were not involved in that peace process. So it was a band-aid solution that was given in 2022.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that the peace agreement was just a cosmetic approach to ending the conflict in the region. And you also mentioned the Prime Minister there. Well, let's talk about that. Now, we've seen the tensions between Tigray's leadership and the federal government ease, since the peace deal, though it's a bit fragile. And we also see the critics still accusing Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's administration of particularly failing to fully address our regional grievances. So let's look at it from the point of the involvement of the Prime Minister. Would you say that that gap has actually allowed tensions with the TPLF to resurface in places like Afar?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you do know that the root causes are not addressed to start with, that is, there is no tendency, there is no goodwill to actually address these issues, because these issues boil down to addressing systemic issues where it amounts to also power sharing. It amounts to how the very unjust way representations is dished out among, it's all ethnic-based arrangement, how the government is made. And the entire system is set up in such a way that certain vulnerable groups who are not represented during the setup of the process do not have access to their political right, to self-governance, to freedom. All these things are beautifully captured in the constitution, self-determination, etc. But the ruling party, rules with an iron grip, with fear. There are like tens of concentration camps, detentions going on at will. The government is not kept accountable. So all this pushes people into war. And on top of that, certain communities, now the grand community, because the ruling party is of power, but earlier Amhara and Afar communities have been, carrying the brunt of this war, because they were not even involved in the process, in the negotiation to at least address immediate issues. So basically, we don't see any goodwill from the regime, Dr. Abiy Ahmed's administration, to address these issues that are rising from the communities themselves or from the political powers and the armed groups that are, demanding to solve these issues through armed struggle. But basically, a lot of the issues that we're handling, for example, in case of TPLF advancing through Afar, we do know that the battle is now being undertaken in Afar, as was in the last about 12 months of the 2-year Northern War. So it's not an immediate, it's a political pressure. It's done to put political pressure on the regime. So, but who would be paying is the people on the ground who would be paying. And the Abiy Ahmed or the TPLF leaders are not put under pressure because they're having this battle in Afar or Amhara, etc. So basically, it's the people who will end up paying the price, and the international community is not putting any pressure. So it is something that they can easily carry on without being accountable for the life costs.
You say that the international community is not really putting pressure. Putting pressure on who? And how would you have wanted them to wade into the situation if there can be some way of stopping the incessant attacks and fights between the forces and government and, of course, the regions?
Yeah, so if we take an example of the Pretoria agreement, and there were a series of negotiations that were ongoing in other places, like in Seychelles, Nairobi, etc. But the route that was taken was this African solutions for African problems. We do know that the US, G20 countries, EU has been behind the scene, kind of putting pressure on the different stakeholders who ended up being present, even if we know Amhara's, Afar, and other also like Eritrea, Djibouti, Sudan, all these have involved one way or the other in the 2-year war during the Northern Ethiopian War, but they were not involved during the solution. But what is very peculiar is that when you push African problems to African solutions, whereas when it comes to African resources, when it comes to debt restructuring, when it comes to how you rule your country, all these countries, whether Western powers, generally global powers, they tend to meddle. But when it comes to solving the problem, they tend to give you these African problems to African solutions. So, this is a way, giving a way out for dictators, because they can say they can remove some stakeholders, they can put, so resolutions for which they are not forced to guarantee, as we've seen in case of the Pretoria agreement. So if these forces, these global powers, can involve in other aspects of our lives, in our economic restructuring, in debt structuring, in how we govern our nation, and let's not forget, a lot of the diasporas, African diasporas, pay taxes into these nations. Why would they not involve us human? Why would we not solve African problems? Why don't we give them human solutions? European problems, human solutions. Why do we only push when it comes to the problems? And that's exactly what happened in case of Ethiopia, where we really get the issues to be solved only by AU and only African, mediators. Whereas we do know, in the name of observers, the same powers who didn't want to take accountability when it comes to giving solutions were still on the background pressuring one part or the other. So I think we should holistically, in a transparent way, address these problems, as a human solution, not just a certain continent. If we have African problems, especially when genocide is involved, when war crimes is involved, we have a responsibility to protect. So I think that is where the problem lies, just giving dictators the leeway to choose their stakeholders, and not to actually address complex problems.
Yeah, I actually understand when you say there's a need for human solutions, because, humans suffer the monumental casualty when these violent attacks continue, mostly as we've seen the conflict devastated northern Ethiopia, killing hundreds of thousands of people and displacing millions. But then I'd like to understand, how are the survivors of these conflicts in Tigray, in Afar, in Amhara, how are they coping today?
That is the actual heart of the problem. We can say that it's an absolutely horrific situation we are under. In Amhara, the war has been going on for 5 years now, with only 4 months hiatus after the Pretoria negotiations have been signed. In Afar, we do get GPE, we do get reports. In Amhara, it's very difficult, because even human rights advocates and people who report on, even these humanitarian gaps, even UN mandated agencies cannot operate easily because of the war. In Afar, we get frequent updates from the Afar Pastoralist Development Association, one of the few that actually work on the ground. And it's the same thing in Amhara, because of the war, the ongoing war. There is absolutely no access to address IDPs, war survivors. Schools have been closed. Health centers have been under drone attack. Markets, etc. Farmers cannot easily handle their harvests. So the livelihood situation and the humanitarian situation is a huge crisis. In Afar, there was actually a recent earthquake also bordering in Tigray region that hasn't been addressed very well, and according to the reports, there is a huge humanitarian relief gap. Again, ever since the 2 year northern war year has culminated, enough relief hasn't been given, both in Afar in Tigray as well. Earlier on, when there was an international focus on the region, there were a number of back and forth and trying to address the humanitarian situation in Tigray as well. But ever since it dropped from the news agenda, even in Tigray, those humanitarian issues have not been addressed. So as all in all, humanitarian gaps, relief gaps, have not been made. And war has been ongoing, like I said, for the last 5 years in Amhara region. So there is no even access in order to address those issues. In similar cases in Afar as well as in Tigray. So, and this should squarely lie on the regime, because there is like development aid agencies give their whatever. I know USAID has been affected through the recent policy change in the US, but there is DFID, SIDA, and all other aid agencies that provide humanitarian aid for Ethiopia. It comes through the Ethiopian, government, and that it hasn't addressed either because it's directly under war with these communities and wanted to use starvation as a tool, to stop the confrontation, but also not having access. So this is a huge problem that we're facing in the 3 regions.
Okay, so we wrap up on this, Dr. Senait. You said it's been about 5 years that this war is going on, and I'm just imagining the amount of heavy weapon and equipment that would have been used to prosecute this conflict in these troubled areas. Now, we still see a TPLF that still manages to launch organized attacks in border areas. Now, where does it draw its strength and resources from at this point? And what can the government do with, of course, possibly those that might be willing to wade into the situation to bring an end to this conflict?
Yeah, so you're right. There is a heavy armed influx into the region, and this is connected to what is going on in Sudan as well. So we have a document coming out very soon. We'll share that with you. So basically, the entire East Africa region is being further destabilized because local conflicts are being used as a way. For example, in case of the Ethiopian regime, it hasn't been able to handle the pressure in Amhara region. It's now the Amhara Fano, the national forces, the FNF has unified right now, and it's posing a huge threat to the regime itself because of how it's totally not handling the situation in Ethiopia. So the regime chose to externalize the problem, and you can see it's trying to rope in Eritrea by posing ridiculous, very aggressive, not in a peaceful way, but a very aggressive request to port access. You can see that the similar agendas were used earlier by Dr. Abiy Ahmed's administration to gain access through Somaliland port. So you can see that it's trying to externalize the internal conflicts into regional in order to cover up the failure both on combat on the ground, but also not being able to address the civil unrest.
Yeah.
So basically, because of that, we can see that TPLF is looking at this as at least certain factions of TPLF as an opportunity to gain access into power, at least to renegotiate their power share. And part of it is done through they're training fighters in the Sudan-Ethiopia border, and that means there is some connection with some faction of powers on the Sudan border. And Eritrea is highly also sensitized by this verbal propaganda that's ongoing from the Ethiopian regime side, but it is that there might be an invasion in tow. So there are relationships that are happening with factions. So when we say where it's coming from, these other regional players would be interested to use some kind of a proxy war, but a lot of it also comes from confiscating, in case of the Amhara Fund, for example, from confiscating arms from the National Defense Force itself.
Okay, so we just actually hope that there could be some sort of dialogue between the spearheads of these particular conflicts in the regions, between the TPLF, the region, and of course the regions involved, and of course the government, because we need to ensure that we're able to protect lives and of course property in Ethiopia. We hope that can be done soon. Dr. Senait Senay, Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia, Director and Amhara Guard Strategic Studies Group member, thank you so much for your profound knowledge that you've shared with us on the show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.